Well, I finally made it back. Since the last video, a lot of life has happened and a little bit of boat building. And for today's episode, I'd like to catch you guys up on both. Thanks for joining me. So yes, it has been far too long since I've been able to get a video out to you guys. As it's been far too long since I've been able to come out here and take the time to set up the camera and take the time to do the editing and all those other things that I really thoroughly enjoy, in addition to just working on the boat. So these life changes that have happened, I would like to discuss because they tie in with the boat building in a bigger sense. But if you really are only interested or get most of your enjoyment out of the hands-on boat building stuff, by all means, just zip forward to this time right here and take from it what you will. I'm glad to have you in any capacity. So for those of you who are curious though about what's been going on, let's take you guys off the tripod here and walk into the office, and I'll catch everybody up. As you can probably tell if you look closely out the window at the little buds on the trees, this is being recorded quite a few months after I walked in here for the first time and recorded what was happening then. The reason I'm re-recording this is there's been changes and changes and changes, and they all kind of affect what's going to be happening with the boat. So to boil it down really simply, I got offered a job and accepted it numerous months ago that was totally unexpected and dominated my life for several months. But more importantly and more interestingly, Megan and I also purchased a wonderful piece of property here in New England that I've been devoting all my time and energy to figuring out how we're going to develop it. As I may have shared in some of the previous videos, I used to design and build residential structures for people for a living. And although I don't do that anymore, don't work with the tools on a professional basis, I still had some skills that I wanted to dust off, and that's where I've been spending most of my time and effort. Switching over to SketchUp here, I'll orbit around a little bit and show you guys what I've been working on. So what we're looking at is the first thing that's going to be built on the property, and that's a 40 by 48 barn. That's plenty high enough for Megan to do her aerials, but most importantly, big enough for me to build the boat inside of it. So if I drop a section plane here at the front by the barn doors, we can take a look at the area where the bowler is going to sit, and also the mezzanine that'll be finished area above for like a future studio, and the area below will be a shop area and storage. Although I can't say I've been unhappy at all with the bow shed, it's really held up well and is a bright and cheery place to work on the boat. It will undoubtedly be more comfortable and more convenient with better access to tools once we're established in the barn. And that's how I've been spending my time. So most recently we've been able to get a driveway cut through the woods, and we're just now starting some excavation. I'm getting to play with some large equipment to put the foundation in for the barn. And although this is definitely going to cut into my time being able to make these videos, I feel like I'm really over the hump, and I can still carve out some time to work on the boat and to work on the videos to share with you guys. And no doubt in the long run, I'll have a much better environment to do both of those things. So thanks for your patience again and sticking with me as I move through a couple huge changes in our lives. And back to the rest of the video. So in the times that I have been able to make it out here into the boat shed over these past 8 or 9 months, what I've tried to focus on are things that I can do for the project that move the project along and keep my hands busy, but aren't mentally taxing. To be blunt about it, this job, the new job and the property and the design work for the barn and the house have completely used up my capacity to think through things several steps in advance, that long-range thinking that you really need to have in mind on a project like this. With having that type of experience in mind, I picked a couple things that I could work at, a few minutes here, a few minutes there, over late summer, fall, early winter, that I knew weren't going to get me in any trouble. And the first thing, most obvious thing for me, is getting the station molds really double checked for their correct position and braced against all the forces that are going to be applied to them with bending some of these heavier pieces of wood into place. So to that end, I started at station 7 and I braced the mold back to the strong back. And then I took this on each side, just a cedar batten, and moving forward, I checked my spacing, made sure the forms were still straight all the way across, and got them locked into place. And it has turned out to be really rock solid. With the station molds then locked in, I could turn my attention to satisfying one of the things I've been most curious about with this build since I started, and that's what is it going to take to get these shear clamps bent into place. So this is 1 inch by 2.5 inch Douglas fir, which can offer quite a bit of resistance to bending and twisting. And the options that I've been thinking about are ripping it into strips and laminating it with epoxy, or steam bending. But as is often the case, I found it useful to step back a little bit and maybe try the obvious first before I tried the complicated. So what you see here are the actual pieces that I just used ratchet straps and some clamps and bent it into the position where you see it right now, which is pretty close to its final position. And I don't really have any concern about being able to go back and fine-tune this and get it to lay exactly where I want it. And I'm really glad I didn't waste any time making it more complicated than it needed to be. However, I might wind up eating my words, because until these pieces are in their final length with scarf joints in place and totally in position, there's always the possibility of just having one break on you. So hopefully this will turn out the way I want it to, and not cause me any heartache in the future. But if so, then I'll just be spending the time that I was originally planning on spending anyway, fixing it. And that brings you guys up to speed as far as actual work that's been performed here on the building jig. So in order to break up some of the talking, I'm going to go ahead and get these pieces taken off and place on the bench and get them ready for scarfing, and also play a little bit of music and run a few video clips that I was able to get over the summer that just showed getting these pieces from the lumber yard and with a little help from Jay, getting everything roughly cut. Cool.
Did the cut once, now you're doing the measure twice.
Yeah, now I'm going to adjust the fence. I got everything chopped up. Actually, the first cut I made, the fence wasn't locked down and started wandering. Whatever. Not like it's gonna sink or anything. Not like
it matters.
Yeah, see?
Whoops. Yeah.
But in the great scheme of things, I can cut that. Glue it nice and snug.
I was gonna say it couldn't be too bad because I didn't hear any cursing.
And 90% of it will get planed off and it'll be of no consequence. So in the bench over there, there's a whole bunch of cedar. You'll know it because it's way lighter than it looks. And those boards can come out and go right here. And we'll cut them in little strips over and over again. The goal here is to send every board through once. And then you pull them off to the side. Actually, now there's not enough room for you to send them back here. So we'll send everything through once. And
I can at least pull them over here onto this side.
Yeah. Yep.
We're doing a lot of complicated things in the world these days, and we're doing them too fast. Something's got to be done about the passage of time. Got to be slowed down. The days, the weeks, the months, and the years go by too fast. Go by too fast. Our lives go by too fast. Go by too fast. We're always hurrying time along by looking forward to things tomorrow instead of enjoying today. Go by too fast.
That was super weird, Andy, but I think we take your point. Anyway, back in the present day, I used a large track saw that had just enough depth to cut to be able to cut the scarf joints in the chine and shear straight stock. And then I commandeered part of the dining room and hallway into the laundry area and laid everything out for epoxying. First, I took my razor knife and roughed up all the faces just to give the epoxy some better tooth, and then clamped these boards in place that I had covered with some packing tape, just so I would have a real good, flat, predictable clamping surface when it comes time to put the pieces together. So, as usual, a coat of neat epoxy, followed by epoxy thickened with mainly wood flour, but also some silica. And then flip the pieces over, clamp them into place where they're supposed to be so they don't spread, and then clamp them in order to get just a little bit of squeeze out, and repeat. The cloudy day really made it easy to set the laser up and then just eyeballing the straight line, align the pieces into their final position. After that, it was a quick matter of cleaning up the squeeze out around the taped up wooden blocks, and then just leaving it the heck alone and trying to keep the dog from getting too close. All in all, a quick process and a lot of show work, and a great place to call it a day. Gluing the shear clamps up inside the house the other day really wound up working perfectly, and there's also a lot of peace of mind that I have knowing that the epoxy was able to cure well within its temperature range, and there's no reason to distrust those scarf joints. So with that in mind, I went ahead and took the opportunity to glue up the chine pieces, similar stock, just another 1/4 inch wider, and I have them sitting over there on the workbench ready to go. And that brings us really to a decision point. Option 1 is to use the inner stem and its nice, broad, flat, fair outer surface as a lamination jig for the outer stem, which is going to be nothing but a bunch of Douglas fir strips glued together. That works really well, and that would be the obvious course of action, except for it's so cold out here, and I don't really have the opportunity to heat this up the way I would like, and this is such an important part. The last thing I want to do is risk having anything less than 100% bond with the epoxy. So what I've decided to do is take the second option. And what that is to go ahead and get the stem, the front edge of the stem shaped to receive the planking. So the outside face right here is cut to what's called the rabbet line. And the way the planking intercepts that is the center of the stem is the actual point where the planking comes together and forms a V. So what that means is the first thing to do is to get a nice clear line. All the time I'm in here editing, and I'm finding that I brought something up out in the boat shed and then never talked about what I said I was going to talk about. In this case, it's the outer stem. Option 2 is going to be, like I said, putting the planking on, and then the stem laminations are just going to get laid over the curve and screwed down with some long screws until the epoxy sets. It'll be pretty simple. Anyway, where was I? So what that means is the first thing to do is to get a nice clear line on the center line of the stem so that as I'm power planing, I don't wind up going a little bit too far. And then after that, it's going to be springing a batten across a few forms and just finding the angle or the approximate angle that I think is going to create a nice flat intersection between the planking and the rabbet itself, which is the actual slanted cut. that's pretty much what I'm looking for. So I'm going to spend the rest of the afternoon playing some copyrighted music really loudly, and we'll just fade this one out. And I want to thank everybody for your patience and for sticking with the channel. And when we jump back into it, we'll have the stem shaped, and we'll be hopefully ready to move on to installing the chine, the shear clamps, and maybe getting the planking going. Thanks for joining me.